Hello, I'm Kerry from Living in Loveliness, and what a very, very busy morning it's been. So my apologies, I'm a little later. I think we're now on 1:05 and I was due to be live at 5. I've had a fabulous morning, lots of people delivering bags, leaving them on the doorstep. I am getting your deliveries, so thank you very much. These will be sent off today, so they're making their way into hospitals. We've got lots of messages coming through on the page, lots of people volunteering to coordinate the deliveries of the collections that you're sewing to different hospitals or points of contact. We are still looking for lots of coordinators. We've got lots of messages coming through and endless requests asking for hundreds of bags, hundreds of headbands. So please keep yourselves busy, keep sewing. One of the requests that I've had this morning, which is I've slightly changed what tutorial I'm going to do. I'm going to do 2 tutorials for you today, and that is to show you how to make really simple headbands. So I am aware that some of you had problems with downloading the PDF file from the website. Some of you are able to download that, so this really is to make that a little easier for you. But the request that I'm getting lots of at the moment is to make the headbands easier to make, and how do you make them from stretch fabric. So that's what I'm going to show you for this tutorial. So those of you that are messaging and saying that you've got lots of stretchy fabric, then we're going to work with that. I am just using my sewing machine, so you'll need a few things for this, and it is much simpler than the demonstration that I did for you for the previous headband. So again, you'll need 2 buttons. These really are to attach just behind the ears, so when the care workers, doctors, nurses are wearing the masks, it is reducing the pressure on the ears from the masks, especially when they're working particularly long shifts as well. And you'll also need a needle and thread. Remember what I've said in the previous tutorials, we are not looking for perfection here. We are looking for speedy sewing because we need hundreds of each of the items. We are at the moment just focusing on getting the uniform bags and the headbands into the hospitals, out to care workers and out to those frontline workers as well. It's wonderful to see you all making connections and delivering these, directly making connections perhaps with neighbours or friends. Remember to keep your distance when you're passing these across as well. So today I've had lots of people just dropping them off on the doorstep, lots of deliveries of fabric, elastic and buttons. So if you are struggling and you do need those, please get in touch and we will arrange sending these to you. But I just want to show you very quickly this afternoon how to make these really easy. These are much slimmer than the headbands, the wide headbands. Now we are being asked for both different sizes. Different people, different hospitals are requesting different sizes. Some want the wider headbands, which I showed you on the previous tutorial, and I will be live again today at 4 o'clock to show you how to make those without the template. But for now I'm going to show you how to make these really simple stretchy fabric headbands. So what you're going to need for this, so rather than providing you with a template, I'm going to tell you the measurements. And again, they don't have to be absolutely accurate, so don't worry about getting your cutting mats and things out. We are looking for use what you've got, keep it nice and simple. So we need a piece of stretchy fabric. It's already got your stretch in there. You can use a ballpoint needle on your sewing machine, but I have to be honest, I've just still got my I haven't changed the needle on my sewing machine and it's not causing any problems for me. See how you get on. If you struggle, do let me know. So you need a piece of stretchy material. This is 22 inches. I have measured this around my head. Please feel free to measure for yourself. This is 22 inches in width by 3 inches wide. We could certainly make these a little wider, but because I'm limited on the stretchy fabric I've got, I'm going to make the slimmer headbands. So when these are sewn together, they are actually 3 inches wide. So these aren't the wide headbands. So just to remind you, that's 22 inches by 3 inches wide on the headbands. And I know a lot of people have been messaging in and saying that it's too tight or they're too small. You can of course measure your own head just using I was just wondering if I'd got a tape measure to hand, but you can just measure yourself. But the size that I'm going to show you today is 22 inches by 3 inches. And what we're doing is, you perhaps won't be able to see this live, but we're folding this in half lengthways, so along the length of the fabric, along the 22 inches, we're folding that in half, making sure the right side of the fabric are touching, and then we're simply going to leave a little gap at the end. So from the shortest raw edge here, you can measure this if you want to, but you can sort of guess this, we're going to leave 2-inch gap. Okay, and then we're going to start pinning from that 2-inch gap. So I'm going to start sliding my pins in from where I'm going to start sewing. You can mark it up like I've shown you before using your pen, just to remind you, but of course I'm working on a darker fabric, so I'm just going to put 2 pins in there. So whenever I slide 2 pins to darker fabric, that means that's where I'm starting, and I'm going to start by reverse stitching. And then the same on the opposite end as well. So I'm going to leave the same distance. I'm going to leave a 2-inch distance. You can use your measuring equipment if you want, but you can just guess that by popping 3 inches from the shortest raw edge. And again, we're going to put 2 pins in there to remind ourselves to reverse stitch, because it's really important that we leave that for turning inside out in a moment and sewing together. And then we're going to slide the pins. So as I've always said in all of the tutorials I've done, imagine your pins are your arrows. You're pointing those to the raw edge of your fabric, and that way that you know that's where you're sewing. Now I can see on the page, which is wonderful to see, some people are sewing 1, some people are sewing 2, some people are doing multiples. Some people I think are currently sewing around the shop and sending hundreds of bags. It does not matter. It does not matter whether you send us 1. It does not matter whether you send us 100. They are all going to be very much appreciated by the recipient. Sew at your own pace. Enjoy what you're doing, because that's incredibly important as well. And just know that you are appreciated for gifting your materials and also your time and skill as well. And it's lovely to see lots of you are getting involved in the group and helping each other and chatting away to each other and linking up with your local coordinators as well. So that's wonderful for me to see every time I go into the group. So just to remind you, if you're joining us, we're leaving a 2-inch gap from the top. Shortest edge, we're popping in 2 pins to remind us to reverse stitch, and then we're sliding the pins and again leaving that 2 inches at the bottom. Again, you can see there that I've popped in 2 pins, and that is to remind me to reverse stitch at that point. And all you need to finish this little project is, as I've said, your needle and thread and your 2 buttons as well. So what we're going to do now is pop that on the machine. I'm lining it up by that first set of double pins. Remember, I leave my pins at least a finger space back from the raw edge, because then I haven't got to worry about removing the pins as I'm sewing. So we're sitting this onto the machine, dropping our foot in line with those first set of double pins, and we're going to start by reverse stitching. Once we've done that reverse stitch, we're then going to sew along. Remember, we line the edge of our fabric up with the side of our machine foot, and I've referred to this as well. So I tend to call this hand my cliff hand, and that really is so I know where to place my hand. I put that alongside the side of my sewing machine foot. I bring that to the edge of the machine and just leave that hand there, and that allows your fabric to butt up against your hand and encourages that straight line there as well. And then you're allowing your machine to sew through the fabric all the way to that second set of pins. And when we get to the second set of pins, we're going to stop and reverse stitch. And remove that from your machine. And it's important here to remove all your cotton. Each time you finish a project, it just speeds everything up and stops it getting knotted up. And now we're just going to remove those pins. By sliding the pins in the way I've shown you, it's really easy to bring those out as well. So using a safety pin, I'm using quite a long safety pin. I'm going to push that through the fabric, so I'm going inside the fabric and I'm pushing it through and just clipping that off. You can see there, so that's sitting on the inside of the headband. And as I push this through the tube now, this is going to help me turn that the right way out. And slowly just bring that across. A bit the same if you're a bag maker and you're making your handles. You can make your handles in this same way. so that she's just quite speedy to bring this through. Remember, this is the headband to make if you're using stretch fabric. So now we've got that little safety pin on the opposite end, and we can just pull that across. That keeps it nice and speedy to bring that through. So we've got our fabric the right side out now. With the fabric flat on the table, what we want to do is have that seam just sitting in the centre, and as we bring this through to stop any twists, we're now going to line up those two shortest raw edges. If I'm completely honest, I perhaps would just sew straight through this without pinning, but if you're newer to sewing, you'll certainly find that pinning these raw edges, especially because your stretchy fabric will try there to put a little roll on. So we're just lining up the raw edges and pinning through. Remember, we're pointing our pins towards the edge that we're sewing. So this is really going to help you if you're doing lots of these and you're doing them as a bit of a production line. Okay, so we're going to pop that onto the sewing machine now. So because it's on a bit of a curve, it'll bend towards us. Line it up in the same way I've shown you, with the edge of your fabric on the raw edge of your on the edge of your sewing machine, and we're going to start by reverse stitching. Now, we might need to move this, what I normally refer to as our cliff hand here, to keep this fabric straight. So we're just encouraging that to go straight because it is on a curve. And we're sewing all the way to the other end and reverse stitching. And we're going to take that cotton off. Remove your pins if you've got your pins in there, and you can see just how fast this headband here has sewn together, and you've got that nice stretch on there as well. Okay, so trim away your excess thread. Now you've got two options here. If you enjoy hand sewing, you can of course hand sew this. I'm going to sew it through the machine. You can of course work with the same colour thread to coordinate with your fabric, but I'm doing this in white so you can see this on here. So what we want to do now is the raw edge of our fabric. We're just going to tuck it about 1/4 inch because that's the seam allowance we've sewn with, and we're doing that on both sides there. So we're tucking that raw edge in, and we're going to push our pins out again just to hold that in position. This bit I would definitely recommend pinning because you'll find that your fabric is trying to curl further in than you want it to go. Okay, so you can just see there I'm pushing that fabric out towards that little gap. As I said, you can hand sew this if you want to. You can sew with the same colour thread so it hides amongst the fabric, but just to show you, we're sewing with white. So I'm sitting that now onto the machine where the open edge is starting, where my first pin is. I'm going to reverse stitch, and again I'm sewing all the way across the machine. I am using quite a wide stitch here, so my stitch length is on number 4, so it's a little wider than what I'd normally sew with. And now we're going to remove those pins and trim away the excess cotton. And as you can see there, we've sewn that hole closed. Okay, so we've now got our little stretchy headband. Now that would be absolutely perfect the way it is, but of course the reason that we're making these headbands is to attach the buttons, so when our frontline workers are wearing their face masks, that the face masks are attaching to the buttons. So again, I've measured where the buttons need to go, and of course, as always, you could check for yourself. But from that seam line, so what I've done just there is I've just pushed, I've got lots of comments popping up onto the screen, so I'm just sitting the seam in the centre of the headband, and then from that seam line, I'm not sure whether you can see that, I'm guessing you can't because it's navy, but where that seam line is where I've joined the headband, I'm going to just pop that onto, let me just measure the last one. So 3. So I'm going to pop that onto my mat just to measure that, and I'm measuring that 3.5 inches from that seam line. I'm going to pinch through the fabric, sit the button on top, making sure that it's on top of that seam line, and starting from the back of my headband, I'm now going to attach that button. Just make sure you've got a little knot on your cotton so it's not sliding through your fabric. Tease that through gently. And I'm now going to attach this. It is absolutely crucial at this part that these buttons are secured tightly. So I would recommend sewing through that button at least 10 times and knotting it off, perhaps 3 times on there as well, because we don't want these to come off when they're being worn. Okay, I can see lots of people coming to join us. Thank you for joining us. I'm not paying much attention to the messages, I'm afraid. I'm trying to keep this tutorial really speedy. I know there's lots of people at home sitting waiting for the tutorials so you can continue to sew. So if you're just joining us now, it's just to let you know that I'm showing you how to make your headbands if you're using a stretchy fabric. I will be live again today at 4 o'clock to show you how to make the wide headbands similar to what I showed you in the tutorial with a template. So if you want to join me at 4 o'clock, please do. If you can't, you can always watch this back. So I've sewn through that button about 10 times now, and to knot that off, I'm coming onto the back of my headband. I'm pushing it through the fabric, and I'm going to leave a little loop. So I've got that little loop, and I'm going to push my needle through the loop and pull that nice and tight to create that second knot. Again, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that 3 times just to ensure that that is really, really tight and that's not going to come off. And trimming away the excess fabric. And I've got plenty of cotton on there now to sew that next button on. So again, working with the measurements, we're measuring 3.5 inches from that seam line. So just make sure you're knotting off your cotton. So I'm just turning this over. You can use your tape measure if you want to, but I've got a mat in front of me, so I'm measuring, this is where my seam line, and I'm measuring 3.5 inches. I'm pinching through the fabric, making sure, and this is to stop any twists and turns when they're being worn, pinching through the fabric, making sure my finger is on the centre of that seam, popping the button. I've lost my, oh there it is, I thought I'd lost a button then. Popping that button on top, holding it into position and pushing from the centre of the headband and securing that second button in place. So this is a really fast, simple way to make the headbands. As I've said, some hospitals are looking for wider headbands, and the reason that they're so wide is because a lot of especially NHS workers are wearing visors as well, and that's causing marks on the forehead. So we're making those headbands wider to protect the front of the head and the ears as well. So if you're wondering why the headbands are so wide, that's the reason. So a little later today, as I've said, at 4 o'clock, I will show you how to make the wide headbands. So if you're working with cotton fabric and elastic, it's worth coming back and checking that tutorial out a little bit later. I will show you the sizes and how to cut your fabric without using the templates that you have to download from the website. So finally, on that second side, I've attached that button. I've gone through the button at least 10 times to make sure that is really secure, and I'm coming on to the back now, so I'm on the inside of the headband if you like. I'm pushing the needle through the fabric, leaving a little loop, and I'm going to knot off 3 times to make sure those buttons aren't going to come off. Okay, so I do think we have some donations of stretchy fabric that we can send out in the post to you. If you would like some of that stretchy fabric, I think we have 10 sets. We do need you to sew those as fast as you can and return them to me, so these can go straight into the hospitals. If you would like the stretchy fabric, then send me a message with your name and address, and just put in there that it's the stretchy fabric that you want as well. Please know I'm working through all of your messages as fast as I can. You can imagine there are hundreds of messages coming through to the page. There are coordinators who are working with your local hospitals. So if you're not local to the hospital that I'm working with or need fabric, please look on the page at the pin post and talk to your local coordinator. So just to show you, we've got those 2 buttons on the back. and we've got a nice slim headband now. These are perfect for care workers out in the community that perhaps do not need the wide headbands. So they are equally as useful and needed as the wider headbands. Thank you very much for coming to join us today, and we will be back live at 4 p.m. I will read through your messages and I will respond to each of you, so you get a response to each of your questions. I can see lots of those popping up, but I wanted to keep this tutorial nice and simple today. So just to confirm, from your stretchy jersey fabric, you need 22 inches in length and 6 inches wide. Okay, in fact, let me just quickly double check that. Yes, it is. It is 6 inches wide. I just had to confirm that. 6 inches wide. Enjoy the rest of your day. I look forward to seeing some of you live at 4 p.m. And in the meantime, pop into the group. Come and join the group if you're not already in there. Sewing for our NHS. And you'll be able to get responses from other people in the group as well. Enjoy your day. It's very sunny outside, so perhaps do a little sewing in the garden. Have a fabulous day. Lots of love. Bye-bye now.